In January 1959, a 23-year-old hiker named Igor Dyatlov led a journey to reach the peak of Otorten, a mountain in the northern Urals of Soviet Russia. The young man brought a team of 8 experienced hikers, many from the Ural Polytechnical Institute, along with him for the adventure. Before he left, Dyatlov had told his sports clubs that he and his team would send a telegram as soon as they returned. But that telegram was never sent, and none of the hikers of the so-called Dyatlov Pass incident were ever seen alive again. The doomed hikers entered the Dyatlov Pass based on what was recovered from cameras and diaries discovered at the site of the hikers' deaths. Investigators were able to piece together that on February 1st, the team began to make their way through the then unnamed pass leading to Otorten. As they pushed through the hostile climate toward the base of the mountain, they were hit with snowstorms that ripped through the narrow pass. Decreasing visibility caused the team to lose their sense of direction, and instead of moving toward Otorten, they accidentally deviated west and found themselves on the slope of a nearby mountain. This mountain is known as Kolat Sikil, meaning Dead Mountain, in the language of the indigenous Mansi people of the region. To avoid losing the altitude they had gained, or perhaps simply because the team wanted to practice camping on a mountain slope before their ascent of Otorten, Dyatlov called for the camp to be made there. It was on this solitary mountainside that all 9 hikers of the Dyatlov Pass incident would meet their demise. When investigators arrived at the campsite, the first thing they noticed was that the tent had been cut open in a way that soon proved to be from the inside and that it was nearly destroyed. Meanwhile, most of the team's belongings, including several pair of shoes, had been left there at camp. They then discovered 8 or 9 sets of footprints from the team, many of them clearly made by people with either nothing, socks, or a single shoe on their feet. These tracks led to the edge of the nearby woods, almost a mile away from the camp. At the forest's edge, under a large cedar, the investigators found the remains of a small fire and the first 2 bodies. Yuri Krivanchenko, 23, and Yuri Doroshenko, 21. Despite temperatures of -13 to -22 Fahrenheit on the night of their deaths, both men's bodies were found shoeless and wearing only underwear. They then found the next 3 bodies, those of Dyatlov, Zenaida Kolmogorova, 22, and Rustam Slobodin, 23, who died on their way back to the camp from the cedar tree. While the circumstances were odd, investigators found that the causes of death were clear. All the hikers, they said, had perished from hypothermia. Their bodies showed no indication of severe external damage beyond what had been inflicted by the cold. However, this didn't explain why Doroshenko was brown-purple in complexion, or why he had gray foam coming from his right cheek and gray liquid coming from his mouth. Furthermore, this didn't explain why the hands of the two hikers under the cedar were scraped away and the branches above them were torn down, as if the two men had tried desperately to seek shelter from something or someone in the tree. Meanwhile, Slobodin had head injuries consistent with someone falling and hitting their head over and over again, and Kolmogorova had a baton-shaped bruise on her side. These two hikers, as well as the others found by this point, were also generally underdressed and wearing some of each other's clothes, only supporting the idea that they'd fled suddenly and without adequate preparation into the freezing night, despite being experienced hikers. It wasn't until the other 4 bodies were found 2 months later that the mystery deepened even more. The remaining hikers were discovered buried under the snow in a ravine 75 meters deeper into the woods than the cedar, known as the Dyatlov Pass Den. Their bodies told even more gruesome stories than those of the other members of the group. Nikolai, 23, suffered significant skull damage in the moments before his death, while Lyudmila, 20, and Semyon, 38, had major chest fractures that could only have been caused by an immense force comparable to that of a car crash. In the most gruesome part of the Dyatlov Pass incident, Dubining was missing her tongue, eyes, part of her lips, as well as facial tissue and a fragment of her skull bone. They also found the body of Alexander Kovatov, 24, in the same location, but without the same kind of severe wounds. The Soviet government closed the case quickly and gave only vague causes of death and speculated that the hikers' own incompetence may have caused their demise or that a natural disaster was the culprit. But the physical evidence of an avalanche just wasn't there, and locals familiar with the terrain later said that such a natural disaster simply wouldn't have made sense in the Dyatlov Pass. There was also the fact that when investigators found the bodies, they noted no evidence that an avalanche had occurred anytime recently in the region. There was no damage to the tree line, and searchers observed no debris. Moreover, no avalanches had been recorded at that site before, and nor have there been any since. But some began to propose non-human assailants. Some began to claim that the hikers were killed by a mink, a kind of Russian yeti, to account for the immense force and power necessary to cause the injuries to 3 of the hikers. Other sleuths point to the reports of small amounts of radiation detected on some of the bodies, leading to wild theories that the hikers had been killed by some sort of secret radioactive weapon after stumbling into a secret government testing, or could it have been a UFO? Those who favor this idea stress the strange appearance of the bodies at their funerals. The corpses had a slightly orange, withered cast. The secret weapon explanation is popular because it is partially supported by the testimony of another hiking group, one camping 50 kilometers from the Dyatlov Pass team on the same night. This other group spoke of strange orange orbs floating in the sky around the area, a sight proponents of this theory interpret as distant explosions. What happened to the Dyatlov hiking group that day? Was it a natural disaster? Was it a yeti? Or was it aliens? You decide.